Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Oh, and the guy is on foot.
I don't know what. It's a big, real big person.
What was that, sir?
That's not human! That's not human!
Ich hab das so, dass ich in dem Wald rein bin. Nicht abgejagt, so lang diese Treppe. So blöd. Und jetzt kein zurück. Nee, in alle Ewigkeit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Phantom Frequency Podcast. I'm your host, Steven, and thank you for tuning in. Before we begin, if you have a personal encounter, experience, or story you'd like to share, you can contact us by email at thephantomfrequencypodcast@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with us through our social media, Instagram at The Phantom Frequency Podcast and Facebook at The Phantom Frequency. I also want to give a huge thank you to everyone supporting the show. Every listen, follow, comment, rating, and share truly helps keep the frequency alive. A lot of time, research, and effort goes into every episode, and your support genuinely means the world. Now, I don't have any guests or a co-host today. It's just me and you guys hanging out, but we're still gonna have fun. Today, I thought it would be fun to do a little reading, a little deep dive into some Dogman encounters from the Michigan Dogman by Linda S. Godfrey. I mean, we all know Linda, who is, is she anything short of a legend in our community? I mean, come on. Without her, no one would even know what a Dogman is because of her absolutely tireless efforts, her investigations, her research, her compilations of eyewitness testimony really cemented Dogman as the powerhouse cryptid that he is today. And rest in peace, of course, Linda. And I figured we'd just take some time to sort of introduce Dogman to the podcast. And I figured there's no better way to do that than to go back to one of her more sought after and rare books I found out recently. Luckily, I do have a hard copy of it, which is quite difficult to come by now. But it's an incredible collection of eyewitness accounts and testimony of Dogman encounters. And I figured we could take a little dive into some of these encounters and read them together, starting from the beginning. And if you guys like this, leave your comments, let me know, and we can do a part 2 and so on and see how far we can get into the book. Without further ado, let's dive in. In early June 2006, I had received an email from Michigan college student John Lyons. He wrote that on the night of June 7th at about 2:30 a.m., he and 3 male friends had gone to check out an old, quote-unquote, church, which actually turned out to be a school, because they had heard rumors of Dogmen in that area. One of the friends, Sean, had visited the area before and had his own sighting. That night, the 3 parked in front of the partially rehabbed building, which is surrounded by woods and marsh, then settled back to wait in the darkness. I had found the case compelling, not only because of the recent nature of the sightings, but because the events involved multiple witnesses and at least 2 individual creatures. In fact, I had the opportunity to interview Lyons by phone only a day after his initial sighting. The following is a slightly edited transcript of the interview I conducted on June 8th, the same day he emailed me. His quotes are in response to my questions. "There were crickets all around," John said. and all of a sudden, they all stopped. I kept on seeing something move over in the woods, kind of a silhouette. I thought it was a deer until we shined the light on it. It must have been 6'9". It was huge, tall. It was a humanoid. I could see below the midsection, could see the thighs, but not the feet. I'm believing it's bipedal. The hair was either dark brown or black, probably dark brown. It must have covered most of the body, maybe an inch long. We did see one arm. One of my friends saw it. His arm was longer than human. We were sitting in the car, comparing it to our own bodies. We were about 50 feet away. It was behind a tree, in a little wooded area, and it stood half behind the tree and half exposed. Frightened, the trio decided to leave. They drove away, but returned after a few minutes, determined to figure out what they had seen. They were startled when the building's motion lights went on, and they heard something moving quickly through the brush. Quote, "My buddy, sitting in the back of my hatchback car, said, 'What's that?' wrote John." End quote. In the tall weeds on the side of the road were two yellow eyes, kind of slanted in a way. It didn't have a long snout like a dog. The snout was narrow. It wasn't human, and it wasn't dog. It wasn't flat-faced like a human. All I saw was hair underneath what I presumed to be a jaw, like a cape or mane. From what I saw, it was slender in stature, not beefy. I would guess 210 to 220 pounds. The head reminded me of a canine shape, kind of triangle-looking head. It was looking straight at us. It could have had ears, but it was too dark to see them. I've seen pictures of Bigfoot, but I don't think this was Bigfoot. When we saw it in the light, when it was standing still the first time, it looked a little hunched, he added. I had the distinct feeling this thing wanted to hurt us. I was holding the mag light, and I was shaking so bad I actually dropped it. When we left, the eyes were behind the car, and the guy looking back thought he saw something go from 2 to 4 legs and went down on all fours and went really fast. The creature chased the car for a short time. The second time, they drove away, John told me. It was not a human in a suit or a bear. I'll put a Bible on what I just said. I'm majoring in radiology, so I know enough about the body systems and anatomy to tell about the features. I didn't notice any productive organs. There was a lot of hair in that area. I don't think this was a paranormal creature. It was biological, not ghostly. I got home and I was so intrigued and freaked out, I sat down and Googled Dogman and got your website. John told me that he was determined to go back for yet another look, and he did so the following week with Sean and their friend, Aubrey. I received this email from him at 3:57 a.m. on June 15th. "Linda, pardon the French, but there was just some weird shit going on here. I cannot describe the depth of how freaked out I am right now." John said that he, Sean, and Aubrey had waited for only 10 minutes that night before spotting a light-shaded object in the woods. After a few minutes, they shined their mag light at it and estimated it stood about 80 feet from their car. "This thing was gray and big," John wrote. "Unlike my first sighting about a week ago. When I saw it, it was kind of squatting, but not really. The closest thing I can relate it to was how an ape sits." The trio was frightened enough to leave, and as John turned on the ignition, Sean yelled that the creature had stood up. They drove about half a mile, but when it did not chase them, again they decided to return to make sure they weren't just imagining something. It only took a few minutes before they spotted the same light-colored object. Now the next few things I'm going to tell you might not be in exact order, he wrote, because to be honest, I still can't collect all my thoughts. In essence, John dashed out of the car to get another flashlight from the trunk, and by the time he hopped back in, Sean and Aubrey had lost sight of the creature. But they had begun to hear animal noises coming from behind the building. He described them as not a bark, 4 or 5 different pitches, like a pack of dogs fighting over something. But this was not a sound a dog would make. It was far too high-pitched and almost sequential. I'm not sure what almost sequential means, but the three listened frozen for an estimated 30 seconds until the noise ended. It was only another half minute before Aubrey said she heard something outside the car. The building's motion lights then went on, and John gunned the engine and drove from the area a final time. Well, what a story to start us off here, guys. That is scary. Now, moving on. Birthplace of the legend. Reed City, the Osceola County town, also known for its museum dedicated to the famous Christian hymn, The Old Rugged Cross, lies within easy driving distance of the Lake County burg of Luther and various sighting spots in Wexford County. These areas are at the heart of Dogman lore, forever memorialized in the mostly fictional song The Legend by former Traverse City disc jockey Steve Cook. Luther was the site of an unexplained animal attack that left claw marks in a house's siding 7 feet off the ground, as well as footprints that looked like those of a big dog. Cook wove a few actual incidents like this together with some old lumber camp lore and tales from other places, then played his spooky recording on April Fool's Day, 1987. He sold CDs of the instant hit to benefit a local animal shelter and continued to update the song until 2009. Although Cook was always upfront regarding his original prankish intentions for The Legend, he later collaborated with amateur Michigan filmmaker Mike Agruza to create 2 videos showing an unidentifiable quadruped on grainy old Super 8 film that became known as the Gable films and tore up the internet forums between 2007 and 2009. The films were exposed as hoaxes on national TV when both men confessed on History Channel's Monster Quest Season 4 finale in 2010. However, the sensational diversion aimed at increasing Cook's CD sales and did nothing to disprove other reports from. Now, I will interject and just say, this is not me reading now. I remember that episode of Monster Quest. I absolutely loved Monster Quest as a kid. And I mean, come on. If Monster Quest didn't exist, this podcast wouldn't exist. I mean, I watched that show religiously as a child. Like, I would just watch the reruns over and over until a new episode would come out. And I remember that episode. They said that they found the Super 8 film. They played it, and it showed this. It looked like a Dogman because it was far away and it was grainy, but it was a guy in a ghillie suit. Come to find out, it was, these guys behind the hoax. But it just looked so scary. And as a kid, like, I had nightmares of that video of this guy. He's on all fours in the ghillie suit and he's kind of looking around, and he spots our cameraman and just comes bounding at him. And they spliced in a little like canine mouth for like a single frame at the camera, and then it ended. And to say I was heartbroken at the end to find out it was a hoax would have been an understatement. I was really upset because as a kid, you want these mysteries to be real. And that song also, The Legend by Cook, again, he made the song for an April Fool's prank on his radio station, very loosely tying in local lore, but was not meant to be factual by any means. But I've heard interviews with him and how their radio station just got absolutely mobbed following that song with calls just nonstop of people coming forward to tell their eyewitness accounts of the Dogman, when he didn't even realize that it was such a prominent thing happening in the area. And this song inadvertently caused people all over town to come forward with their stories, and it kind of was the first big bump in the knowledge of Dogman and stories being circulated. It sort of started all that because a lot of people were keeping quiet about it for fear of ridicule. But yeah, I just had to mention those couple things. But jumping back in here, earlier in 2006, Monster Quest documented the Reed City sightings as supporting evidence for their initial American Werewolf episode. And yet, other than a brief portion of John Lyon's interview, very little of the video shot on that trip made it into the film. A big reason for that was that the new HD camera the crew used somehow added a line of unerasable technical data to every picture frame. Considering how often weird electronics glitches seems to put the kibosh on the documentation of cryptid research, perhaps this shouldn't have seemed surprising. Something else really did surprise me: my own digital Minolta, which contained images of strange footprints around the schoolhouse, unexplained animal eyes, and more, somehow disappeared from the passenger seat of the History Channel's rented van that evening around 1 a.m. after I stopped shooting and placed it there. Who took it? The witnesses were in my view or the cameraman's at all times. Only one car came down the road the whole time we were there, and there were no other dwellings nearby. It has occurred to me that the witnesses could have arranged to have a companion in a fursuit skulk around the area, and that perhaps this person managed to dart from the bushes, open the door from the van without the videographer or myself taking notice, nab my camera, and then quietly close the door without making even a soft click. But it seems unlikely. We stayed very close to the van. Acoustics were extremely good there, and anyone wearing a fursuit on that hot and muggy night would have been miserable. Also, no human could duplicate that wet dog sound we heard, and human eyes don't shine in the dark. If true, however, it would also explain the upright thing I saw across the road. At any rate, all 5 of us combed the road and the ditches with flashlights for a very long time and never found my camera. Lacking another explanation, I'd like to say in jest that the Dogman ate my camera. If so, I hope the beast found it indigestible. Having no proof for that scenario, however, I continue to examine all available evidence on this entire cluster of sightings. One factor that argues slightly against the case's validity is the fact that all of the witnesses knew each other, a situation that always makes it possible they cooked up the story ahead of time. With that in mind, early on, I interviewed John's friend, Sean, back in June 2006. Sean claimed to have seen the creature a few years earlier with another friend. They were driving by the building one night, he said, when they noticed movement and saw the yellow eyes. It was standing up on 2 legs, and it was off in the woods at the tree line about 50 feet back. He said then it chased their car. We wanted to get the hell out of there. We flew into his dad's driveway. We weren't drinking or nothing. Both of us saw it. After that, we went once every 4 months, and we used to go inside the church. One day, there was a dead owl spread out inside the door. There was a handprint burned into the wall. When the Monster Quest crew visited Michigan in 2009 to tape the show's finale, they asked the Reed City witnesses to appear on an episode. John and Sean both stuck by their stories, but neither he nor any of his friends wanted to go on camera again. They had told their experiences once, they said, and had no desire for further publicity. This is consistent with the behavior of most other witnesses, I might add. Wow. Well, I mean, the fact that you refuse to go on Monster Quest to tell your story because it's difficult to do so, I think lends a lot of credibility and validity to their testimony and their story. Because you know what skeptics love to say, they did it for fame. Well, clearly not. But regardless, the witness conundrum. The Reed City sightings are a perfect illustration of the ecstasy and the agony of eyewitness sightings. Without people who are willing to take the time to contact a researcher and risk public ridicule, there would be no sightings reported, and most investigations into the nature of cryptid animals would cease. I believe the great majority of creature sightings reports come from credible, ordinary people who have seen something extraordinary in the course of their daily travels and activities. They seldom want anything more than additional information or perhaps validation. Some even say they feel they have the duty to report their experience in order to help the research. There's a very small percentage of witnesses, however, who either invent a tale completely or become obsessed with a questionable photo or video and then seek publicity for their bogus claims. Hoaxers' motives can range from a desire to have some fun at the expense of others to a malicious intent to make a researcher look foolish. Some even hope to profit by inventing a cryptid character to serve as a base for sales of CDs, t-shirts, bobbleheads, you name it. Want to spike sales of your Jersey Devil t-shirt? Spawn a few new sightings. Get Channel 92 to put it on the evening news. Auction your blobby photo on eBay. Make a faked video. Unfortunately, it's the latter group that gets most of the mainstream press and who are most often invoked by skeptics as the reason to disbelieve the other 97% of reports. The problem lies in weeding them out. A few are easy to discern, but in the end, the evaluation of any creature incident depends entirely upon the honesty of its eyewitnesses. In the American Werewolf episode of Monster Quest, the producers addressed the uncertainty of witness testimony by asking witnesses to take a polygraph test administered by a specialist from the Minnesota area. They were limited to those witnesses who were within close traveling range of Delavan, Wisconsin, where the experts were set up at a motel. Not one of the witnesses tested declined or even hesitated to be tested, and all 7 people received results of no deception detected. The producers couldn't even fit them all into the final cut of the show. Of course, that only proves that they believe they saw what they reported. But what all of these people reported was something very hard to explain. And so are many of the sightings that have come my way since then. Since it is impossible for me to administer polygraph tests to all those who have contacted me, I simply do my best to report what witnesses said and what I know about the person, the place, and anything else that seems important. Readers can make their own decisions about the veracity of each witness and the possible nature of what each claimed to see. Whatever that is, one thing is clear. If, as Ray Parker Jr. says in his Ghostbusters theme song, there's something strange in your neighborhood, if there's something weird and it don't look good, people are going to call. The rest of this book is devoted to them. Chapter 2. Man-wolves of the Manistee region. John Lyons and his friends were not the only ones to report an upright wolf-like creature in the Reed City area. A report that echoed their claim arrived in December 2007 from a resident unrelated to the Lyons group. His sighting occurred about 2 miles north of the schoolhouse sightings, near a chain of small lakes. Between the two sightings, areas lies mostly undeveloped, sparsely populated rural land. The year was about 1994, and the witness was a young teen at the time. He had a nightly habit of sneaking out of their rented farmhouse to smoke cigarettes behind the garage, facing a big, rotting barn. His habit was strong enough to draw him outdoors, even on a snow-filled January night. Don't smoke cigarettes, kids. He was turned towards the barn, he said, when he saw a dark shape poking out of a broken board in the barn wall. At first he thought it must be some unknown hunk of farm equipment, but as he continued to watch, the equipment moved. It had a strange look to it, he wrote, almost like it had eyes and large pointy ears. But I figured it was my imagination running wild. After all, this barn was quite a ways from where I was standing, and it was dark, so I just kept staring at it and smoking. A noise coming from the nearby woods startled him, however, and he saw the thing turn its head to look as well. Last I checked, he said, farm equipment does not move. After it turned its head to the noise, it turned right back to me. It had been watching me the whole time. I wasn't going to take my eyes off it. He estimated the creature stood 6 feet tall on its hind legs and was dark in color. It had a dog-like appearance, he said, a pointy nose and really big pointy ears. It looked as if it kind of had a hunched back, but like I said, it was far away and it was dark and it was in the barn. I walked backwards into the house because I was terrified to turn my back to this thing, even though it was too far away to catch me that fast. Once inside, he said, he grabbed a flashlight. Hands trembling, he told his mother what he had seen. Predictably, she did not believe him. He ran back outside and trained the flashlight on the barn from a safe distance. but the creature was no longer there. He checked for footprints in the snow the next day, but there were none, leading him to wonder if it might still be in the barn. He also noticed that the drift where the creature had stood was more than 3 feet high, and the creature stood 4 to 5 feet higher than that. The witness said he considered and discarded the possible explanations. It was the wrong shape for a bear, too big and bipedal to be a dog, and too cold for some neighbor to be playing tricks on him. A female friend also saw something strange outside that house while visiting after the incident. She just started crying one night, he said, and it took me hours to get her to tell me. She just said, "I seen something the size of a buffalo, and it looked like a dog, and I don't want to talk about it anymore." I knew what she had seen. I didn't tell her I had seen it too. She was already too scared as it was. He said that while he did not see this creature again, his family was concerned that pets, especially cats, began to go missing. At the time, he said he had never heard of the Dogman legend and didn't know that other people near Reed City had seen the creature until he saw my accounts of it online. The next story is hunting horror. Another unrelated report of a Reed City area sighting came from a deer hunter who was nearly scared out of his tree stand in November 2007. Sam was 20 at the time and hunting with 2 companions who were stationed at separate spots. The time was 4:30 p.m., with dusk approaching. Sam was getting ready to head in when he noticed the birds suddenly become quiet, and he could see nothing moving at all. The stillness was broken when 2 does moved uneasily through the clearing Sam was watching. After noticing a foul smell that reminded him of old mothballs, he was shocked to see an entirely different animal enter the clearing. It was large, dark-furred, and walked on 2 feet. Not like a bear, but more like a hunchback, he said. A bear can't walk that fast on 2 feet, not to mention run, he added. The creature continued running on 2 feet through the clearing, presumably after the deer, and then finally dropped to all fours to continue its pursuit through the woods. It had upright, pointed ears, Sam said, and the body was sleeker than that of a wolf, although broader in some areas. It stood about 6 feet tall on 2 legs and had a muzzle similar to that of a husky dog. Sam decided to stay put until his friends came to pick him up in their truck. They laughed at his story until Sam pointed out the tracks the animal left in the snow. The tracks resembled those of a dog, but broader, he said. 4 toes were visible, with about 2-inch claws leading them. The front paw prints, where the creature dropped onto all fours, measured 5 inches long by 2 to 3 inches wide, and the rear paws measured 7 inches long by 3.5 inches wide. Could it have been a bear? The tracks measurements come close to the size a very large black bear could leave, but a bear track shows 5 toes. Sam is also correct in guessing that a bear would not have run through the clearing on 2 feet. Bears will rear upright when surprised or when looking at something, but they do not travel bipedally as a rule. Even if they did, their loping gait and big hindquarters make them fairly easy to recognize, especially at close range by an experienced outdoorsman. It would also seem unreasonable to describe a bear as sleeker than a wolf. But that is not the end of the story. On the second day of the hunt, Sam could not make himself go out in the dark morning hours and stayed behind until about 2 in the afternoon. When he decided to arm himself more heavily and try again, he took a pistol, knife, and semi-automatic rifle and went to sit in his tree. The afternoon was uneventful until around dark at 5 p.m. when he heard 3 shots about 100 yards away and sounds of screaming came from his walkie-talkie earpiece. He climbed down to find one of his companions running at him after having seen the same creature Sam saw the day before. Sam's friend also described it as a dark furred with yellow eyes and said that it had left the same footprints. The pair stayed in for a 3rd day of their hunt while their 3rd friend hunted and saw nothing out of the ordinary. Thinking that perhaps the animal had left the area, they all hunted on the 4th day, but Sam and the other witness shared Sam's blind this time, neither wishing to be alone. They were not alone. No sooner had they settled in than the creature ran upright into the clearing in a dim morning light this time aware of their presence and staring directly at them. Almost grinning, said Sam. They noted that its arms seemed as long as a human's. Sam's buddy pulled his weapon, and the creature immediately changed course and ran into the woods, making a growl, hissing noise. The pair sat tight, waiting to see if it would come back. About an hour later, their other friend called on the walkie-talkie from his blind and asked, you guys, are you in a werewolf suit at my blind? Because it's not funny. 5 shots immediately followed. Sam and his friend scrambled down the tree, hopped in their truck, and raced to pick up their now believing companion. He was shaking as he showed them his gun stock, which had claw marks on it. The creature had charged him, he said, and he shot the first round almost accidentally as he tried to block the attack. The noise scared it back into the woods, and he fired the other rounds, hoping to keep it away. The 3 rode back to their cabin, where they found more of the same tracks and claw marks by the door. They decided to grab their belongings, abandon their blinds, and leave, although they had planned to stay 7 days. As they left, they felt something slam into the rear of their truck, but it was dark by then, and they never saw what it was. Sam said he later tried to tell a DNR agent about the creature, but said he just thought I was nuts, so I never made an official report. I'm actually thinking about abandoning my blind. I'm scared to death to go back there. Suffice to say that the additional sightings lend much more credence to the Lions incident, especially since the hunting encounters occurred within a year of the sightings at the old schoolhouse. The fact that the other Reed City event, the farm sighting, occurred in 1994 suggests that the creature had some history there. And as would be expected in that case, Dogman reports flow in from the wildlife-rich surrounding area too. Only about 5 miles northwest of Reed City lurks the thousands of acres of woods of the Pierre Marquette State Forest, which together with the adjacent Huron-Manistee National Forest comprises almost 1 million acres of wild land. That is one whopping chunk of wildlife cover. It is difficult to believe that the dense growth of evergreen oak and many other types of trees was once clear-cut by the lumber industry, then replanted after an attempt to lure farmers failed. Even though the wide-scaled habitat destruction must have been devastating for the animals that live there, today the forest teems with known species of wildlife, from deer and ruffed grouse to large predators such as bears. And if witnesses are to be believed, it has also regained a few unknown species. The land is a continuing source of strange creature sightings. The word manistee is from the Ojibwe for spirit of the forest. That seems appropriate since for many years people have been seeing something here that acts unlike any known natural animal. In The Beast of Bray Road, I recounted the old logging camp tale of 2 lumbermen fishing near Manistee who were accosted in their boat by a swimming dog-like creature, and the story of Robert Fortney, who stared down a grinning bipedal dog after shooting a member of its pack in self-defense in Mecosta County in 1938, for starters. The forest range stretches almost as far north as Traverse City and southward to Muskegon County, ranging several counties eastward as it goes. In Hunting the American Werewolf, I told the story of Tammy Moss, who saw an upright, furry dog-like creature cross the road and then realized yellow eyes were glaring at her from 7 feet above the ground, just north of Traverse City in 1989 or 90. It was just a year earlier in 1988 that Daniel Roszensky, who is now a reporter for the Manistee News Advocate, had made it his summer mission to drive the highways and backroads of the forest until he found the Dogman, made famous in Cook's Legend the previous decade. He and a friend, Tony, thought nothing of jouncing along rugged 2-track lanes in very secluded areas in the wee hours of the morning, bolstering their nerves with Dead Can Dance blasting from the car's speakers. They were further intrigued as local papers had reported cattle found killed by some large predator. The road on which the pair received their fright, however, was no muddy forest trail, but Highway M55, a well-trafficked straight shot through the Manistee National Forest. They were following a line of several other cars. Roszensky wrote me in 2006, when they spotted a creature that moved partially upright, crossing the road ahead of them, silhouetted in the headlights of at least 3 cars. It appeared to be a skinny, furry creature. It moved more like a human would than an animal, he said, not unlike a baboon with long limbs. Its shape was totally unlike a bear, he said. It was much too big to be a coyote or ordinary dog. The creature melted into the blackness of the ditch alongside the road as Rosinski slammed on his brakes, and by the time he could manage a U-turn for a second look, it was gone. The pair were so unnerved they decided to just go back home. He was sure the occupants of the other vehicles had also seen it, and often wonders what they thought about the odd creature. I also received a secondhand report of another sighting told to me by researcher Mark Curtis, which occurred just north of Ludington, Mason County, in April 1997. A female friend of his, Lola, and her uncle Jim were hiking on the Lake Michigan shore near the Manistee National Forest campground at about 11 p.m. under a full moon. As they picked their way along the shoreline, they saw what looked like a large log lying on the water's edge about 50 feet ahead of them. As they walked towards it, they were shocked to see the log jump up and stand on 2 feet, staring back at them as they felt the hackles rise up on their necks. The creature was the first to take action. It sprang to the side and began running away from them at great speed, heading north along the shoreline and then eastward over the dunes. The whole incident was over in seconds, leaving both Lola and Jim shaken as they realized how vulnerable they had been coming so close to the large beast. Lola and Jim have slightly different memories of the event. Jim recalls the creature dropping to all fours as it ran over the dunes, while Lola thought it stayed in a bipedal mode. They both estimated it as 4 to 5 feet tall, shorter than most man-wolf or dogman reports, and covered with short, dark fur. They did not find footprints and described them as a dog-like with claws, but with a strange shape, replacing the usual toe pad. When they returned to camp and told relatives about their encounter, their family informed them that they had just seen the Michigan Dogman. Neither had ever heard of it at that point. Curtis added that both Lola and Jim were hardworking, successful people with no prior interest in strange creatures. He made his own research trip to the campground, and while he did not encounter any dogman, he did learn from a local news photographer that a trapper had recently found a very large wolf tracks just south in Ludington. It is not at all unlikely that a gray wolf could wander into that area. Closer to Dogman Central near Baldwin and Little Star Lake in July 2004, two 12-year-olds were out for a summer joyride on a golf cart on a private rural road. Acting with good safety consciousness, the pair stopped at a crossroads and looked both ways before proceeding. Although they did not see any approaching vehicles, they did spot the silhouette of what looked like a large dog running along the road on all 4 legs. As they squinted at it, to their amazement, the creature rose up onto its hind legs and continued that way. As the writer said in her email of August 22nd, 2006, we had never seen anything like it. It was so skinny and tall to be a bear, and it obviously wasn't a man because it had been running on all 4s very fast. Nothing like the speed of a man. My friend doesn't like to talk about it, and she tries to forget about it. The writer added that she cannot listen to Cook's The Legend because the thoughts of the dogman running around in the woods just downright scares me. A more bizarre Manistee incident came from a Kentucky man who happened to be vacationing at a secluded cabin near Manistee in 2003 or 2004 with his wife and her parents when they all glimpsed something unexpected. The man and his wife arrived around dusk to find his in-laws already there. His wife immediately ran into the cabin, but he took a few minutes to stretch and look around. He noticed a wide path into the woods and something walking on the path, only 30 to 40 yards away. It walked on all 4s and seemed to be dog-like, but larger than any dog or a wolf. It moved in absolute silence, but paused when it saw the man and stared at him, grimacing as if making a soundless hiss. The man was so fatigued from the 12-hour drive he had just made that he turned away and ignored the creature to begin unloading their vehicle. That's crazy, by the way. A few minutes later, his in-laws surprised him by popping out of the woods on the same path where he had just seen the large quadruped. They had also encountered it coming back from the opposite direction after hiking with their dog. They watched as it ran away into a field and affirmed that it was huge, dog-like, but moved smoothly like a big cat. Of course, it did not walk upright, but one feature of dogman or man-wolves noted by many witnesses is that they are able to switch between two-footed and four-footed modes very easily. Although I don't always publish strictly four-footed sightings, I will include some in this book, particularly when the sightings occurred near other reported incidents. In this case, the animal was so large and unusual, the man wondered if it might be a leftover direwolf, an animal with massive teeth and a bit more size than an average gray wolf. It was well distributed across the North American continent during the last ice age and has been extinct for several thousand years. Could some have survived over the millennia in the Manistee National Forest? Unless one is captured, we may never know. I also must note that there are no indications from fossil skeletons of Canis dirus that it walked upright, so it still would not necessarily explain the other Manistee sightings, and there is one other report that is unexplainable by any standards. And that will lead us to our final story of this evening, the Ravenna Scrabbler. On January 3rd, 2004, 4 young men aged 12 to 17 decided to take a winter's night walk through the woods belonging to one of their parents just outside of Ravenna in Muskegon County. They were only a few miles southeast of the Muskegon State Game Area, which lies nearly adjacent to the southernmost tip of the Manistee National Forest. They followed a trail through the still and silent woods to where the property line ended, and there they all began to smell an overpowering stench that the writer said, "I can only associate with death," which is odd because the air was roughly 30 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature at which even rotting flesh could be frozen and absent of smell. Next, they began to hear something moving through the brush as if it were circling them. "This put us on edge," he wrote, and my brother and his friend, the younger two in the group, were losing composure. I decided to loop around and exit down a trail parallel to one we entered on. I knew this trail very well and was confident on it due to the lack of treetop coverage, which allowed the moonlight to illuminate it just enough for me to have the upper hand in the evening when we were being stalked. The 4 stuck together on the new trail, with only one flashlight between them. They had made it about halfway back when they all stopped in their tracks. Scrabbling at the snow and leaves at the base of a deer blind about 15 feet away from them was a whitish-colored humanoid creature that stood up to face them on 2 legs. It was about 3 to 4 feet tall, naked and furless, with human-like hands. Its head was round and human-like, but the light was not bright enough to show the facial features. After both parties stared in shock for a few seconds, the creature dropped to all fours and took off down another trail at what looked like an incredible speed. The 4 young men turned and ran in the opposite direction as fast as they were able. The witnesses said the creature reminded them most of the character Gollum in the film versions of The Lord of the Rings. Upon discussing it, we had all seen the same thing and could not understand what it was and what it was doing. I mean, a creature with no fur, no clothing, and stringy like this thing could not possibly be that active in below freezing temperatures. At my request, the man's younger brother sent me his own written statement of the events. His account tallied very well with the account above, with one addition. He remembered the creature emitting a scream-like, high-pitched sound as it ran away. He also added that it was close enough as it scrambled for cover that he could be sure it was not a human playing a prank. He also affirmed that the 4 of them ran for their house in a terrified, all-out sprint. 5 years later, the brothers hoped to spend some time searching to see whether this creature still lives in his parents' woods. Given the extreme strangeness of the situation, I'm not sure if I should wish them luck in finding one. The only natural explanation I can think of might be a coyote with mange. It would stand about the right height, but it would not have hands or a round humanoid head. It would also seem odd that a coyote would have exuded such a noticeable stench. The Manistee National Forest area does teem with creature strangeness, and it shares a common feature I'd noticed with Midwestern sightings in general. Encounters not only usually happen near a water source, but tend to aggregate in areas adjacent to the Great Lakes. It is almost as if these waterways form the basis of a migratory route that circles east to New York and then follows the Mississippi River south, and also forks to a lesser degree, but to the west into Iowa and Oklahoma. But there are ample sightings of upright dog-like creatures in the rest of Michigan, including the eastern side of the state along Lake Huron and the more populated areas south of Muskegon. I had one brief report from Conklin in Ottawa County in August 2009 that described a large dog-like creature spotted walking on its hind legs by two boys as they were shining for raccoons just north of town near a creek and bike trail. Dogman likes to range through his entire home state, it seems, and remains busy claiming new territory. And that's where we'll end it here, because I'm starting to lose my voice. It's a lot of reading out loud. But I hope everyone liked that. That was definitely a really good introduction to the subject, and no better way to do that than stories told by Linda Godfrey herself. And that'll bring this episode to a close. And like I said, yeah, if you guys liked the reading and want to hear more about Dogman, I can definitely do more episodes on this book. And I am actively searching for people to come forward onto the show to share their Dogman encounters. Working on a few at the moment. So keep an eye out for that. Like I say in the intro, if you guys have any stories, anyone wants to come on the show to share anything personal they've encountered, please email me. I love to hear from you. I try and get back to everyone as quick as possible and set up dates to get you on. But as always, I'm Steven, and this has been the Phantom Frequency Podcast. Keep searching, keep questioning, and keep listening, because the greatest mysteries are still waiting in the dark.